Smash fans have a considerable amount of say in who gets put into Smash Brothers, especially recently with the fighter ballot helping to make up a good chunk of Ultimate's newcomers. But it is also very common for characters to be decided without our say. This is where promotional characters like Roy and Corrin come in, but it's also where we get some surprises. Even Sakurai himself has said that literally nobody said they wanted Wii Fit Trainer as a fighter. And he did it anyway. Honestly, great power move right there. There's enough argument to say fighters like Villager make more sense because Animal Crossing is a bigger franchise that was already recognized in Smash, but from a gameplay standpoint, I have to say Wii Fit Trainer is a bit more appropriate in hindsight. Wii Fit is all about physical fitness, so there are plenty of moves to give them based off of exercises. Then there's going the extra mile, giving them a temporary buff with deep breathing and making an actual projectile out of Sun Salutation. They can also spike a volleyball, which I love doing. Wii Fit Trainer is a surprisingly decent, balanced fighter that I feel like people should be talking more about, but just don't. Similar to Yoshi, I think I kinda get that there are more interesting characters, but at least with Wii Fit Trainer, I feel like the gameplay is a little bit tighter, more solid. Maybe I'm just caught up in the novelty of Wii Fit Trainer being a fighter to give them that much more of an edge over fighters like Yoshi. Even I'm not too sure about my logic, but, you know, they're close enough together in this list. Maybe Yoshi just needs to work out more. Here's a fun fact about me. Ever since I was a kid, my favorite animal has been monkeys. Even if they're macaques or primates, I think they're all just fun. So you'd think I'd like Diddy Kong as a Smash Brothers fighter more than I do. But I don't. As a character, Diddy Kong is about exactly as I would expect him to be. Fast and nimble, with decent combo game, and a decent mix of specials. A gun that's a nightmare for people with nut allergies, a flip that I use way too much, and he can drop the bane of all competitive Smash players who wouldn't shut the hell up about random tripping and brawl. That last one especially is so damn funny to me. And I don't even mind that he also uses realistic animal noises like Donkey Kong and Bowser. The monkey sounds are great. But I don't know, I never really feel all that good playing a character like Diddy Kong. I think part of that is that he's not all that strong and takes a bit more effort to KO foes. Again, take note on this to call me out on my hypocrisy later. I prefer a fighter with a bit more punch, more power, and Diddy Kong was never really about that in the Kong family. He gets results when he needs to. He did save Donkey Kong himself once, and had his own kart racer for a brief period. That counts for something in my book, at least. So, we're all in agreement that the Pokemon anime had a big part to play in deciding the majority of the playable Pokemon fighters in Smash Brothers, right? It's not just me. It's the only reason I can think of as to how a random-ass Gen 1 Pokemon like Jigglypuff managed to get into Smash before the likes of Mewtwo and Charizard. Well, that and the developers could reuse some of Kirby's assets, so it's an easy bit of fighter bloat. And yet, we're over 20 years past the release of the original Super Smash Bros., and they still bring Jigglypuff back. I think I remember they were close to dropping her in Brawl, but they didn't. I feel like a big reason for Jigglypuff constantly coming back is because of how unique she is as a character. The most glass cannon character I can think of in Smash. So light, not a powerhouse, easy to smack around and KO, and tricky to handle. But when you take a moment to learn Jigglypuff, you find her air game to be phenomenal. So many solid combos, and decent attacks to smack opponents around with. Again, not easy to use. I've gotten myself killed with that janky-ass rollout plenty of times, and nailing that rest is a pain. But when you pull it off, it is so satisfying. Out of all the fighters, I can respect the hell out of anyone that can pull off Jigglypuff. But is she still necessary to keep in Smash? Maybe not, but I don't see a good reason to drop her personally. All the original 12 characters have never been dropped, and they are all a staple in their own unique way. There's plenty of reasons to keep them, and hardly, if any, to ditch them. I can't imagine a Super Smash Bros. Game without Jigglypuff, and frankly, I don't want to. Another great thing about Super Smash Bros. Is how they bring both popular franchise and obscure ones into the limelight. Get obvious characters into the ring, sure, but also show the world lesser-known icons and get people curious about their games. Smash being one of the first video games I ever played means that pretty much every game represented was new to me for my early years. But by the time we were approaching Smash 3DS and Wii U, I became savvy enough with gaming, or at least the internet, to see so many more games. At one point I heard about Xenoblade Chronicles. It was well received by people who played it, but it didn't do too hot when it first released on the Wii. When I saw people wanted to see the protagonist Shulk as a fighter, I was all for it, even if I didn't know much about the game myself. Sure enough, Shulk got in, and Xenoblade got so much more attention. But how does Shulk play? Alright. Overall, he's pretty average, with some above average reach with his smash attacks, but what really sells him is his neutral special. The Monado arts buff some of his stats while lowering others, giving plenty of options to approach the fight. For me, however, I only ever really use two, Buster and Smash, and only break out Shield in an emergency. I never see a need to use jump or speed. So yeah, as solid as he plays, I don't get a whole lot of mileage out of Shulk's stat adjustments. Also, why did they put Fiora in his final smash? Chain attack uses all party members, but you can only have 3 in your party in Xenoblade, so why put in a 4th? It's such a huge spoiler, too. Obscure fighters in Smash Bros. Isn't limited to newer characters. I can't imagine too many players nowadays have any idea who Pit or the Ice Climbers are, and I can't be surprised if people think Captain Falcon is an original Smash Bros. Character. Hey Nintendo, want to do something about that? But Smash is basically an interactive museum of gaming history. But 12-year-old me was pretty proud of himself for already knowing about Rob. Thank you, Nintendo Power, may you rest in peace. Despite how old he was. A unique part of gaming history, and an important one, keeping gaming alive before Mario swooped in to save the day, of course he'd get into Smash Bros. Somehow. And goddamn, that cutscene in Subspace Emissary where the ancient minister fought back against Ganondorf and revealed that he was Rob, not one of the generic enemy versions, the Rob. That shit was so hype, I was losing my mind. But once again, I have to ask, how does he play? Again, alright. Rob is an interesting heavyweight, with beefy moves and potent projectiles with a lengthy recharge, and one of the best recovery moves in the series, even if it's not offensive. He takes a bit of getting used to, but it's easy to see that he's got a decent amount of raw power, through his smash attacks, aerials, projectiles, and even that side special I love spamming so much. I spam a lot of side specials, don't I? But this one also deflects, so it's worth it. It's also fun to think about Rob being the only fighter in Smash who's technically not a video game character. He's a peripheral, a glorified game controller. Meaning, Rob is kind of the only real-life fighter in Smash Bros. That's kinda wild. Okay, I know I picked on Pichu a lot, and admittedly I might take some more shots at him, but there is one more kinda minor reason I'm not a fan of him. I'm okay enough with the idea of fighters being similar to each other, even as semi or pseudo clones, but if the fighter is a carbon copy, or even worse, an inferior carbon copy, I'm gonna have some problems. Pichu is an inferior carbon copy, but I'm also not crazy about who he's a carbon copy of. But fret not, Pikachu mains, I'm not gonna be calling the bigger Sparkmouse trash. Unlike Pichu, I have a substantially easier time seeing why people would use Pikachu. In such a small package, you have a beautiful mixture of speed and strength with a nice electric-flavored punch. I've been bodied by a fair amount of Pikachus, and I can see the hype. Part of my ranking Pikachu this low stems from the fact that I never really used him all that much for many years, for some reason or another. Come Smash 3DS and Wii U, I realized this, cause I was just not very good with him. With a bit of time, I got a better handle of him now. Still not as much of a standout compared to other fighters in my eyes, even other speedy powerhouses, but still, solid. He's an overrated Pokemon, but it's at least nice to see he can pull his weight every now and then. And especially to see that he doesn't zap himself with every attack. Okay, I'll ease off of Pichu a little bit. Did you know Super Smash Bros. Is not the first platform fighter to make a god a playable fighter? As far as I know, that honor belongs to Zeus in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, an actual Greek god. He's not that great, to be honest. And a fictional goddess is not that much better. So it's kinda interesting. Palutena was one of 2 characters that I didn't think would make that good of a Smash fighter at first, but I warmed up to the idea right before they were revealed. In Palutena's case, I had second thoughts literally the day before she was revealed during E3 2014. The timing was too good. I had thought Palutena would use all of the attacks she used on Pit in the boss fight in Kid Icarus Uprising, but her initial gimmick was having a diverse set of custom specials, like the Mii fighters, all based off of powers she grants to Pit in that game. One of the things that made Palutena not that great was the fact that her default specials were kinda meh. And I, like seemingly many, didn't do too much with custom stuff. For Ultimate and the lack of customs, they combined her Reflect Barrier and Counter into one down special, made her Explosive Flame her new side special, and that made her slightly better. Palutena is actually fairly decent in battle, using pretty far-reaching attacks to deal with multiple opponents at once. In recent matches playing as her, I get the vibe of a less floaty, easier-to-use Rosalina. Even if that still doesn't stack up compared to other characters, I feel like that's a decent enough pick for a fight. Also, her side taunt is her swinging on her staff like a stripper pole. That's probably the best thing about her, besides how big of a troll she is in Kid Icarus Uprising. That's always fun. I've come to realize in recent years that despite boasting that I main random and have played as anyone since OG Smash, there are plenty of characters I hardly ever used until recent years. Part of the reason why I suck as a number of older characters like Pikachu. Two such characters, besides the one that I just mentioned, is Zelda and Sheik, a 2-in-1 interchangeable character mixing two different playstyles that you could switch between, in Melee and Brawl. The recent Smash game separated the two into their own character slots, and it wasn't really until that point that I decided to put more time into both of them. In my childhood days, even before the internet, I knew Sheik was the more popular choice between Zelda's personas for her speed and mobility, and after finally putting some more time into the separate versions of these two, I finally realized that I've never actually been that big of a fan of Sheik. Her attacks never really did much for me, and her speed didn't make up for her lacking strength, at least for me. I will say that separating her from Zelda was the best choice for both of them. From a mechanical standpoint, the two were too different from each other to make switching between the two pointless when you can pick a preference easily. Plus, Sheik's new specials, the Smoke Grenade and Bouncing Fish, are great additions to her moveset, way better than the useless Ice Chain. But hey, even if I'm not crazy about her, at least Smash gives Sheik more screen time than just Ocarina of Time and Hyrule Warriors. So, take the wins where you can get them. I'm probably gonna lose some serious brownie points from Nintendo as a self-described Nintendo fanboy for putting their star child this low on my ranking. But hey, how many people can blame me? How many Nintendo fanboys can blame me? In any spin-off game, Mario is the token balanced fighter, jack of all trades, master of none, very versatile, great for beginners to learn the game, but capable enough to stand up in a serious fight with decent players. And even I admit he's a reliable pick for any fight. My problem with Mario is he's boring. As reliable as he is, he doesn't really stand out enough for me to pick him over other reliable beginner-friendly fighters. And again, I ask, who can blame me? How many of you actually pick Mario and other Mario spin-off games? Why, when there are other more interesting fighters? And as if to add insult to injury, Mario's moveset is not as good as it used to be. Well, just his down special. His Mario Tornado was a great crowd-clearing move, but from Brawl on, they gave him Flood. Rather than hurt people, it just pushes them. Yeah, it's possible to make it work. I actually managed to score a KO on my oldest brother by pushing him. And yeah, it felt pretty good. But it's extremely situational. It would just be nice to have this practical, albeit boring fighter with some more offensive tools. Maybe a little more familiar in comparison to the older games. Would be nice. Oh hey, when did Mario go to medical school? Seriously, out of all choices for carbon copy clones to fill Melee's roster, Dr. Mario has to be one of the most random picks. Especially considering Luigi was already filling that role back in the original Smash. And Sakurai was thinking Luigi should be more of his own character sooner than Nintendo did. Even today, Dr. Mario is close enough to Mario that you could rank them as a tie, and at least I'd hardly bat an eye. The biggest difference, besides the scary reliance on over-the-counter medication, is slightly stronger attacks at the cost of slightly slower speed. And the difference is so minor that it would normally completely fly under my radar, like a lot of the other between-game differences all the technical Smash players notice. But that's the weird thing, it actually kinda doesn't. Somehow. I really don't know. I'm weird. I will not deny that. I'm not really sure how I notice, but I do, and it makes enough of a difference to prefer him over the Plumber Edition. Gotta take whatever you can get when you have a character as milquetoast basic as Mario. Plus, Dr. Mario still has the Dr. Tornado. That alone makes him better than at least post-Melee Mario, if nothing else. But even in Melee, I prefer Dr. Mario. So I guess people are finally in agreement on what kind of genre Super Smash Bros. Is, I think. It feels like it's been years that we've spent arguing about whether Smash Bros. Could be considered a fighting game or not. Or maybe that was just Sakurai? Well, no matter what, there's video game characters that have been beating the shit out of each other for over 20 years. We've seen characters from all sorts of genres, so it was only a matter of time before we'd see someone from a traditional fighting game. Platform fighters are a different sort of beast from normal fighters, but it's crazy to see just how characters like Ryu fit into Smash Bros. As well as they do. They made a career out of punching and kicking people without mercy and with little else to do. Seems like making them jump isn't as tall an order as I thought. And in another show of Sakurai going above and beyond, these fighting game characters can use their original inputs to execute stronger versions of their specials. It's a very nice touch for traditional fighting game players. The biggest problem that I have with this, however, is that I wind up getting a little too distracted with trying to do the correct input, to the point where I forget there are normal attacks like a common Smash noob. Hell, I still can't even do the Shoryuken input intentionally. Ryu in particular may have been the first fighting game character, and is a solid Smash fighter all around, but as with many other fighters, the newer models are more interesting. Kinda true about Ryu in general, actually. As Sakurai has said in the past, Echo Fighters are not a Smash exclusive concept, and he even highlighted Ken Masters as one of the first ever Echo Fighters. With a true statement like that, it was a matter of when, not if, Ken would get revealed for Smash Ultimate. Granted, I also thought Shadow was an obvious Echo Fighter pick for Sonic, and that didn't happen, but whatever, can't win them all. I've said before that I'm fine with clones if they can set themselves apart enough from the fighter they're copying, even if it's just a little bit. Ken is not a perfect example, but he sets himself apart from Ryu more so than any of the other Echoes. So much so that I have to question why he's still considered an Echo Fighter when other fighters aren't. Seriously, what are the rules, Sakurai? What are the rules? Anyway, Ken takes Ryu's style and speeds it up a bit, and throws in some more kicks, and a fiery Shoryuken, and his Tatsumaki whatever hits more, and his back throw is sick. Okay, why would anyone choose to main Ryu over Ken? Especially with the movement thing, having the extra bit of speed and mobility make for a better experience for a game like Smash Bros., as we will come to see with other fighting game characters, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The Mario princesses are interesting to think about. In the main games, they typically get captured by Bowser, or the Dime Store equivalent, and get rescued by the Mario Brothers. It's usually in spin-offs, where they actually get to do anything, even competing with Bowser himself. Then Smash Bros. Comes around and invites these princesses to fight, and according to most tier list makers, they're actually better fighters than Bowser. Or at least Peach is. Peach was my first exposure to damsels in distress kicking the crap out of their captors, and it was wild for my stupid toddler brain. I didn't play a lot of Peach back then, but now I've played quite a bit, and it's a decently fun time. The style of her attacks fits her motif well, and throw in the ability to float, and you've got yourself a fun little mix-up character. And can we talk about Toad? Poor old Toad. Being forced to protect his princess against his will, shooting out those weird gross spore things, and now he does it voluntarily, and even helps Peach grab people. Nice little character development in Smash. It's enough to make me wonder what he would be like as his own playable fighter. Maybe the next Smash Bros. Game. Maybe in the next Smash Bros. Game. Then Ultimate decided to make Echo Fighters a thing, and highlighted that by making Daisy a fighter. Unnecessary as all hell, especially when Waluigi would have made for a unique fighter. Also why I can't knock on Rosalina as a wasted slot anymore. But whatever, my uncle doesn't work for Nintendo. The weird thing about Daisy and Peach is that I could have sworn they were at least slightly different. I played through their classic mode routes back to back, and I swear it felt like Peach was slightly slower and stronger. But nope, looked it up, and there's no real difference. Daisy just has orange colors, flower motifs, blue Toad, and eats flowers for her final smash. Because, of course she would. Why wouldn't she? Other than that, the same. I've gone back and forth on which I prefer. I would have said Peach because her voice is slightly less grating, but honestly the only grating thing about Daisy's voice is when I spam her side smash attack, and that's just me being an idiot. I can't really go based solely on design like the Belmonts. Their palette swaps kind of balance out. So I guess I have to go with my preferred princess, which is Daisy. Weird considering Rosalina, as I said before, is more up my alley, but I don't know, Daisy just does it for me. Maybe it's the shorter hair? Whatever. They both have an S attack, and that's all that really matters in the end. Part of my past idiocy with who should and shouldn't be in Smash came down to aesthetics and genre, mostly. A fighter from a realistic-looking game clashed so much with the more cartoony and kind of anime style of Smash Brothers. At least that's what I thought. Looking at where the roster has come in the past few years make this claim so much more ridiculous, but even then it didn't hold up. Melee and Brawl had this weird thing where the developers tried to make the graphics more realistic with all the details added in. Just take a look at Mario's overalls that weren't there in the source material. I don't really get Melee, but I can believe if Brawl did it to make it more believable that Solid Snake could exist in the same universe as Kirby and the Pokemon. He still kind of stood out like a sore thumb, but I gotta say, he transitioned to a more animated style in Ultimate quite nicely. He looks great. Not only that, but he also ditched his useless landmine down smash attacks, so now I can't really complain that he came back. As a fighter, Snake is a very interesting change of pace. A normal-sized heavyweight fighter weighed down by all the explosives he brought, cause guns weren't allowed until Bayonetta and Joker came in. He has decent power packed into his moves, even his CQC attacks. The extra range from his specials really pack a punch too, if only I can make his C4 work properly. I'm not exactly coordinated with Snake, but I can see how he can really kick ass in the hands of competent players, especially with such an OP Final Smash. And while it does suck that they didn't make any new ones, it's so cool they brought back the codec calls in Ultimate, arguably the best part about Snake in Smash. You know, when you sit down and think about it, the idea of getting stronger as you take more damage is kind of a great strat for suckier Smash players like myself. I guess that's why there's the rage mechanic, but to be perfectly honest, I'm like 75% convinced that competitive Smash players are just gaslighting everyone to thinking it's a real thing. I can't notice it outside of the Rage Blaster item. Joker is apparently a top tier character because of how the Rebellion gauge works, but part of the reason I don't see the hype is because it only leads to a temporary upgrade. Remember how I said I get more mileage out of Lucario's aura mechanic? Well, it's about time I highlight him a little more now, is it? I remember back in the early Brawl days where I was convinced Lucario was intended to be an offensive replacement for Mewtwo, purely because of a similar neutral special and relative floatiness. I will never admit to not being stupid, regardless of what time in my life I'm talking about. Lucario is a solid close quarters fighter with a few range options, but what sells him is his aura. Its power grows with his damage, capping out at around 187% damage. Not entirely sure what the cap is in stamina mode though. It's a very high risk, high reward mechanic, but you only lose it if you heal or are KO'd, and still have stocks left of course. So you'll still be kicking ass as Lucario by the time Arsene vanishes. The risk does keep Lucario on the lower end of the list for me, though, along with the fact that there are more interesting movesets out there. But hey, we got at least one fighting-type Pokemon in Smash Brothers. You ever notice that? It's really weird, isn't it? Both flavors of Mario are solid Smash Brothers fighters in their own right. But let's not kid ourselves here. The real talk of the Mushroom Kingdom is the superior Mario brother. I never did understand Nintendo pushing the narrative that Luigi is second fiddle to Mario, cause I don't know a single person who doesn't think Luigi is better, at least outside of Smash Brothers. Part of the reason Luigi is better is because of his personality. Mario is pretty generic, but Luigi has stuff going on. It's evolved into more cowardice with Luigi's Mansion and all that, but Smash Brothers gets weird with it. His attacks are a bit more wacky, with an actual jab for a side smash, a flailing dash attack, a jump punch with a sweet spot, and whatever butt propulsion turns him into a rocket. Don't even get me started on his down taunt. Anyone that can get a meteor KO with it is a Giga Chad. There's also whatever dark psychedelic drug trip that was his final smash in Brawl, but we're just gonna forget about that, cause the Poltergust makes more sense. Luigi is admittedly not one of my go-to picks. Hell, sometimes I actually prefer the more controlled Doctor Brother. But Luigi is and always has been the more interesting and fun brother. His personality is actually a perfect reflection on the wackiness of Smash Brothers that I consider to be the best part of the series. Maybe he should be number one after all. Hey, Nintendo? I already talked about how Smash Bros. Helps bring lesser-known franchises into public view, but there's no franchise that had a bigger impact from Smash than Fire Emblem, for better or for worse, depending on who you ask. Marth and Roy's inclusion in especially Melee, with how popular that particular game got, was a huge boon to the franchise, leading to a franchise that became huge all over the world, even if Awakening was expected to be the last at first. It's kinda crazy to think how, despite all of that, people have gotten sick of seeing Fire Emblem reps. There are even more Mario and Pokemon fighters, but a few too many anime sword fighters is something to bitch and moan about? Come on, people. Anyway, we're finally talking about Fire Emblem fighters, and my least favorite out of all of them is the first one. Just like Fox, Marth was another popular pick for competitive Smash Bros., with his lightning-fast sword strikes and his apparently abnormal grab reach. Unlike Fox, I have an easier time wrapping my head around how to use him properly and kick ass with him. And yet his moveset is comparatively more boring than Fox. Maybe it's just because I'm more of a fantasy nerd than a sci-fi nerd. I'm not entirely sure, but comparatively with Fox, I do kind of feel like I have a little bit easier control with a fighter like Marth. Maybe it's also the princely attitude that kinda lends himself to a more controlled gameplay, or maybe I'm just reaching. I don't know. Truth be told, Marth was originally a lot lower on this list, closer to the furry Melee champion. He was another fighter I didn't originally play all that much, and again, kinda boring moveset, that I eventually came around to playing more. Except it wasn't necessarily Marth I was playing more as. People love to complain that most of the Fire Emblem fighters play the same, or that there's too many sword fighters, and it most likely stems from the fact that we've had more than one direct clone of Marth. One that was upgraded into a semi-clone, and one that got a fancy label. In Lucina's defense, there is a lore reason behind her playstyle. Roy was just roster filler. Though like Roy, Lucina does have some differences. For one, she was slightly shorter than Marth before ultimating. She was scaled up a bit to properly work as an Echo. Seriously, what are the fucking rules? The biggest difference is the tipper mechanic. Marth's falchion is strongest at the tip of the blade, adding a layer of spacing to Marth's strat. The strength of Lucina's parallel falchion is evenly distributed throughout the blade, making for more consistent damage output. I don't actually know if this makes that big of a difference, but I can somehow feel it. I don't know how this is the minute detail I notice, but it is, and it helped increase my appreciation for Marth's and Lucina's playstyle. It also helps that Lucina is one of my favorite characters in Awakening. It's just nice to have a character I enjoy in another game be fun to play as in a different one.